This happened maybe 8 or 9 months after I moved into my first house. I was 24 at the time, fresh out of college with a decent job. All you need to know about the house is that it had a very spacious basement that I mostly used for storage. The previous owners had partitioned it into these separate rooms using plywood and exposed framing. There was the main area at the bottom of the stairs, then a laundry section, then what I think was supposed to be a workshop, and then this weird back room that was mostly just storage. It had kind of a maze-like quality to it. You couldn't see the entire basement from any single vantage point, which I remember thinking was kind of cool when I first toured the place. Anyway, it was a weeknight. I needed to go downstairs to do laundry, which was the only time I ever really went down there. The basement lights were already on, which I thought was weird, but I didn't dwell on it for whatever reason. I'd been down there a few days earlier, so I figured I just forgot to turn them off. The space was dim even with the lights. I hadn't bothered changing the old yellow incandescents that had been there when I moved in. I started walking down the stairs, and things escalated so abruptly that I couldn't react quick enough. I made it to the bottom of the stairs and started walking toward the laundry area when I saw movement in my peripheral vision. I turned my head instinctively and locked eyes with a man who was crouching behind one of the folding tables that I had set up near the far corner. It was so unsettling that I almost dropped the basket. My brain refused to register what I was seeing. There was literally a stranger hiding in my basement. I couldn't move. All I could do was stare at this intruder who was now staring back at me, and it was not a pleasant stare. He looked like he had just crawled out of a sewer or something, and then he stood up and ran. Not at me though, further into the basement toward the partitioned rooms in the back. That snapped me out of my fear-induced haze, and I started moving backwards toward the basement stairs. But I must have wasted too much time, because before I could reach the stairs, all the lights in the basement went out. Until that moment, I had never been down there with the lights off. I hadn't anticipated how dark it would be. It was fully pitch black down there, complete and utter darkness. I mistakenly assumed I knew my own house, so I kept moving toward the stairs, but I must have misjudged something, because I tripped and fell to the floor. By the time I got up, I was completely disoriented. The chaos and fear of the situation was overwhelming my brain, and I couldn't think. My phone was sitting on the counter upstairs, so it's not like I could just reach in my pocket and turn on the flashlight. I started screaming like a lunatic, thinking that might scare off whoever had broken into my house. But actually, that strategy must have energized them, because I started hearing screaming coming from the other side of the basement. It was terrifying. I was screaming into the darkness, trying to seem like I was crazy, and someone on the other side of the room was doing the same exact thing, and his screaming was much more intimidating than mine. He legitimately sounded like a murderer. I stopped screaming, and he followed suit. I started navigating around the basement purely by touch. I had no other choice, and I started hearing movement behind me. He must have been doing the same. The sounds were getting closer, and amidst the horror of everything, I couldn't help but get the sense that he knew my own basement better than I did. I knew I was getting closer to the stairs, but that basement is massive. I started hearing breathing coming from somewhere behind me, and I genuinely thought he was going to catch me. After what felt like an eternity, I felt the wooden base of the staircase. I grabbed the railing and started running up the stairs, but before I could even hit the second step, something grabbed my ankle and I lost my grip. My head struck the railing and I fell all the way down to the basement floor. I still couldn't see the guy, but he was dragging me away from the stairs with what genuinely felt like inhuman strength. I kicked and thrashed my legs with all my might and miraculously connected with something. The strike was just strong enough for him to lose his grip, and I twisted and twisted until I escaped his grasp. I started running back towards the stairs in the dark, and he started screaming again, but I found them before he could catch me. I made it to the top in the dark, burst through the door, and slammed it shut behind me. The nightmare was far from over, though. That door doesn't have a lock, so I had no choice but to press my weight against it and hope I was strong enough to keep him out. Just as I suspected, I heard footsteps pounding up the basement stairs mere seconds later, followed by a huge crash against the door. The door swung open for a terrifying second, and it took everything in my power to push it closed. The first impact must have emboldened him, because he started repeatedly slamming into the door. I yanked off my socks and pushed against the door, knowing my life depended on it. I have no idea how he did make it through, but he eventually gave up. I heard footsteps crashing back down the basement stairs, and I immediately seized the opportunity to grab my phone. I ran over to the counter, grabbed it, and ran back to the basement door. With my back pressed against the door again, I called the police. When they finally arrived, that guy was gone. I kind of had a feeling. One of the basement windows had been forced open from the outside, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what happened. There was nothing missing or stolen, so one of the officers suggested that the intruder was probably using my basement as a place to live or hide. That hadn't crossed my mind, but it was